Over the course of years, I created a life for myself in which my addiction was allowed to flourish. I cut out everything and everyone from my life that posed a threat to what I was building. I destroyed relationships, broke promises, lied, cheated, stole, and hid in the shadows. Any threat of invasion only forced me to reinforce my walls. Eventually, my creation became perfect. At least perfect in the sense that I was left alone to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. I had achieved the perfect environment to enjoy my hard fought for freedom. But what I foolishly thought was freedom was not freedom at all. My sanctum of solace was indeed a prison. Welcome to episode 10 of Two Drunks with a Mic, the podcast where we share our past so that others might have a future. Your subscription and sharing of our show is greatly appreciated. We've already had a great impact in getting in front of people that are being helped. We are grateful and humbled by the testimonials that we receive. I also want to give a shout out to David O. and Eric V. over at podcastrecovery.com. I really had a good time sitting down with them last week on their podcast and sharing my experience, strength, and hope with their audience. One of the most difficult things I faced in early recovery was trying to come to terms with the lack of trust from those closest to me. After all, there I was, miles below rock bottom, finally admitting I needed help and wanting nothing more than to get back some sort of meaningful life. I was finally surfacing from years of incarceration in my self-made prison, the darkness slowly giving way to the light. I was fighting the hardest I knew how, the fight to regain those of whom I feared had been lost forever. For years, I only wanted to be left alone, but now I was finally at a point at which I truly wanted more than anything to be back among those I had spent years pushing away. So why wasn't it happening? What was their hesitation? Why wasn't I able to make them see and believe that this was truly what I wanted? Why wouldn't anyone trust me? But most confusing of all, why was it that the distance between us seemed, at least from my perspective, as far as ever? And though I struggled long and hard to gain understanding, all I ever got from trying to answer these questions myself was anger, frustration, and doubt. I secretly wallowed in this self-pity until one day I was asked why I thought I deserved to be trusted. Did I feel entitled because I had poured out my guts, swearing that I was going to give it all up for good? Was it because I had agreed to enter a program? In short, I was asked if I felt entitled to their full and undivided trust because of mere words. And this deflated me. I simply couldn't answer it, at least to a point that justified any thoughts I had of being the victim. And I most definitely couldn't argue against its logic. I mean, let's be honest here. I had spent years and years lying and manipulating my way through life. People were simply responding the way I had conditioned them to. How could I realistically expect any different in those early days? I couldn't. And holding on to the idea that I was somehow deserving of their trust was only hurting me. My expectations amounted to no more than resentments waiting to happen. Reflecting on this question brought to me a perspective that forced my misplaced expectation and resentment to slowly give way to healing. Eventually, I was able to relax, put my trust in God, and let the process to which I had agreed to adhere to in the program do its thing. My days of instant self-gratification were over. They needed to be. My life depended on it. Maybe someone's listening to this and they're in the same spot I found myself back then, finally at bottom and wanting nothing more than to get back that which has been lost. Family, friends, wife, a career, maybe a husband or their children, or maybe their self. To them, I'll say this: it takes time. But perhaps the more important point is that it takes action. In the quest to gain back what we once had, in this case, the trust of our loved ones, words are worthless. Actions, however, are priceless. Once I came to grips with the unavoidable reality that all the trust I yearned for needed to be earned back, and that words were worthless and actions priceless, I put my head down and I went to work. Finally, the day came, and everything I had hoped for in those early days of my recovery came to pass. So here's how I did that. I was honest. I was open. I was willing. Not just with everyone on the outside that was in my life, but with myself too. I did the exact opposite of what I did for years. Instead of pushing away, I started pulling in. I invited everyone to be a part of my recovery. I gave them full access to what made my addict mind tick. I gave them 100% access. I gave everyone permission to hold me accountable. It was scary and it was uncomfortable. It went against everything I ever stood for. But that's the point. You see, I didn't want to go back to being a slave to alcohol. I didn't want to ever see the Four Horsemen again. I didn't want any more visits from the screaming witches and the shadow people, or the blacker than black apparitions that would circle my bed at night, taunting me as I hovered above, helpless, watching them consume me. My time in the darkness was over. God saw to that. And I meant it to stay over. The darkness and light cannot dwell in the same place, so I chose the light. I wanted my family back, and today they are back. I did what I had to do and remained patient. Once I let the negativity of self-pity go, I never looked back. There was no future in it. But more important than my outward actions was my faith in God. I trusted Him. I trusted where He was leading me. I'll admit that there were, and to some extent still are, times in which my faith is tested and seems as though it's not enough. But I'm not saved by the amount of faith I have. I'm saved by the grace of the one in whom my faith rests. And for an addict like me, that's a very good thing. So let me leave you with this. You can get out and you can stay out. If you're out and struggling, get around recovering people that aren't, and do everything you can to find the honesty, openness, and willingness to stay out. Quit pushing and start pulling. Bring people in and have them help you build your accountability. But most importantly, pray to God. Don't wait for your faith to grow to some predetermined level. God can and will meet you where you are. Jesus didn't come for the whole. He came for the broken. And I was more broken than I could possibly even explain here. Yes, it takes surrender. Yes, it takes being uncomfortable. And yes, you might get your feelings hurt along the way. But at the end of it all, you might just find that small price you paid being a little uncomfortable is all that was ever required to get back that which you had feared lost. Until next time, God bless.